Hello, friends, and welcome. I'm Cassidy Carson, and this is The Life of a Writer. Today is Tuesday, January 27th, 2026. We are in the final week of the first month of the year, and it is the time of year when things feel like they're dragging a little bit. So if you are feeling that way, I'm sure you're not alone. It can be a little bit of a letdown after all the excitement of the holiday season, and we are in the coldest and darkest part of the year here in the northern hemisphere in the US. So if you are feeling that way, I hope that you're getting through the day as best you can, that you're enjoying yourself as much as possible, and just hang in there, because we're all dealing with the world around us, I guess you might say. Now, today, I'd like to talk a little bit about feedback. So, my work in progress for Restless Spirits Book 2 is with beta readers. And one of my beta readers happens to be in-house, my writing partner, husband, business partner, all rolled into one, JT, is reading through and leaving comments on the manuscript. But he did bring up a point that he wanted me to consider, and I'm not going to go into too much detail right now, but I did come to the realization with this comment that this is something I need to work on in my writing overall, because I think my personality is coming out in my characters maybe a little bit too much, and that I need to really sit down and think about my characters as individuals and not completely just extensions of myself. So with this in mind, I'm thinking about the fact that this feedback is not only valuable for the book that I'm currently working on, but it is also valuable to my writing process. And hopefully I will remember and learn from this as I move forward on my future projects. So each time I take the advice of beta readers and editors, I'm hoping that I am maybe ingesting that advice and really taking it to heart, so that as I'm working on future projects, the projects will come out a little bit cleaner, and maybe I'll be avoiding some of these challenges in the future. Now, every writer is going to have different feedback, of course. No writer is perfect. Some writers may struggle a lot with grammar or spelling or punctuation or, plot, or there are so many different things that can be a challenge for a writer. So learning how to take feedback is very important. It's also important to learn how to give feedback. If you do happen to work with another writer as a critique partner, or you decide to beta read someone else's work, it's very important that you give your feedback in such a way that you are not necessarily attacking the writer or their work, but you are showing where something can be improved. And there is a very distinct difference in the presentation of feedback, because there are people, and I have seen it myself, there are people who will say, "This is horrible, why are you even writing?" That is not constructive criticism. That is more of a personal attack on someone, and that is not a good way to approach giving feedback, because you're not giving someone a specific thing to fix. You're just basically saying the whole thing is a mess overall. And if that's the case, if something really needs to be worked or reworked from scratch, you can say that, but don't just tell someone that it's terrible and it should never have been written and, throw it out. Because even if something is that much of a mess, it is a valuable lesson to the person who wrote it, that they went through the process, they sat down, they finished something, if nothing else, and now they can build on that to figure out how to make improvements so that the next draft will be better. And I have watched videos of some authors who will basically write an entire manuscript and then rewrite the entire manuscript from scratch. And I'm not sure how someone could do that. I have a very hard time, if I'm not going to tweak a manuscript, starting from ground zero can be very difficult. So kudos to anyone who writes that way, and you basically, instead of smoothing out the draft that you have, you rewrite the whole thing from scratch, hopefully making it a better product. But it is, we all have our different ways of approaching things, whether it's writing or whether it's giving feedback. And learning how to do it the best way possible is an important part of the process. So I know that over the years, JT has been hesitant to give me feedback on my writing because I was very thin-skinned about it. I have hopefully matured over time and learned that feedback makes us better. It's something that we mentioned during our podcast, that we hope you will give us feedback. We may not take all of it, because sometimes something is more a matter of a personal preference than something that actually needs to be fixed. But the idea that feedback makes us better is a really important thing to remember. So if you are someone who is working through a manuscript and you are in the feedback process, I feel you. It is a very intimidating thing to have the first sets of eyes look at your work, because at least in my case, sometimes I feel like, oh, this is really great. On the other hand, I may also feel like, oh, this is terrible. I'm just going to get all kinds of negative comments. And, I think usually it's going to fall somewhere in between. It's not going to be the best thing ever, but it's also not going to be the worst thing ever. So it's important to remember that as we go into the feedback process, and whether that be beta reads or critique partners or the overall editing process, it is important to learn how to take the feedback, to learn which feedback you should and should not integrate into your work, because not everything needs to be changed. As I mentioned, there are some things that may be more a matter of personal preference, and it can be hard if you take too much feedback. Maybe it could change the tone of your work, because what you have written has your voice in some way, and integrating too much feedback could dilute your voice a little bit, I think. So it's very important to be careful to learn just which feedback to take and how much of it to integrate into your writing process. So I just wanted to chat a little bit about that, because JT was talking to me about some points that need to be fixed in my work, and I was completely expecting that. I rewrote what I was writing several times as I was writing it, which is probably not the best idea. So I'm hopeful that it at least makes sense overall, and that the few points that JT has made so far can be easily integrated to make it a stronger and better book and more enjoyable for readers. Now, the other thing is that JT is not a romance reader, and I'm currently writing paranormal romance. So the advice JT is giving me is not romance novel related. And that's something else to keep in mind. It is more of a structural, just an overall writing tip, and not specifically related to the romance genre. That is something else to keep in mind, that there are different types of feedback that you can get on your book. So it is important to have people maybe who are familiar with your genre to give you feedback, or working with critique partners who write in the same genre. That can also be very important in making sure that your work will appeal to the right audience, because sometimes maybe you're not including as many parts of that specific genre, as many tropes as would be something that would be enjoyed by the readers. And it's just, there are just so many thoughts going through my head right now that I'm trying to keep my mental processes stable, because I am writing or rewriting the book as I'm talking to you right now, which also could be problematic because concentrating on one thing at a time is usually a good option, but sometimes our minds don't work that way. And I think especially someone like myself who tends to think about, oh, I don't know how many things all at once. It can be hard to just do something in a linear fashion. And I think I mentioned yesterday that one of these days I will sit down and make a real attempt to record a linear video where I don't go off on tangents. And I'm pretty sure JT would appreciate that, because I'm often going off on tangents when we're discussing things. So I obviously just went off on a tangent right there. Anyway, back to feedback. Oh, feedback makes us better. It's important to learn how to both give and receive feedback. And it is important to remember that you don't have to use all of the feedback that you're given. A lot of it is personal preference. If it is something very structural or something grammatical, where it's really going against what the common rules are, the rules of language, then those you need to really pay attention to. It is, you can fudge around a little bit with syntax and punctuation and things like that, but you have to know what you're doing first. So learning how to take that feedback is very important, and not only to the process of the book that you're currently working on, but to your writing process as a whole. So that's my discussion for the day. Thank you for joining me here. I hope this made sense, because once again, I went off on a tangent. So I will do my best to do better in the future. But in the meantime, I thank you for joining me. I'm Cassidy Carson, and this is The Life of a Writer.